Government fails, the world's off its rails, leaders are whacked, democracy is under attack. It's time to get smart, folks, time to get real. Let's cut through the crap, tell us how you feel. Let's cue the talent, let's meet the host. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on back into another podcast by George. We've got a returnee to the podcast. It's Lucas Nelson with MedFarm of Iowa. And with everything that's been going on, I just haven't had much time to get to anything other than the coronavirus. And of course, these hellacious riots around the country. And I've been looking for some windows to do something different. And you know, sometimes I just saw maybe you saw the one I put up on Beaker Street, which was kind of fun. I'd had that in the can for a while and wanted to get that up. And while I've got a little bit of a break, I wanted to turn my attention to something that again leaped off the pages to me here in the great state of Iowa in the Heartland, and it has to do with legal cannabis with MedFarm of Iowa. Maybe you saw the podcast earlier with Lucas, but the state legislature has passed a new law that affects these folks, and I'm not exactly sure how to read it. When I first looked at it, I thought, well, this is good news, and I looked at it a little closer, and I don't know, is this good news? It might be fair to middling news, but I know Lucas can tell us. And again, the reason I get so frustrated with this, a lot of things on the, the worldwide order, I don't know that much about. I mean, I kind of couch what I have to say on this podcast, but I know a couple of things. One thing I know is alcohol, and I know a lot about it. I used way too much of it. I grew up around alcoholics. I've seen people staggering ass drunk. I mean, falling down what we used to call piss limber, fall on the floor, not be able to get up. I know alcoholism like people have never seen. People guzzling it like it's a liter of Mountain Dew. I've had relatives die of it. I know all about that, folks, and it's not something I want to make light of, but the other thing I know something about, having grown up in the 60s and 70s, I know something about cannabis. Not legal cannabis. I know something about illegal cannabis. I know people that use it. I know people that use it a lot. I mean, I've been in a house where they had a hookah going in the living room, or where I had to run out of the place like a man fleeing a burning building. I mean, I know cannabis, at least street cannabis. Now, comparing the two, there's no doubt in my mind what's the greatest harm to potential harm to everyone, to Americans. And folks, it ain't cannabis, it's alcohol. My God, there's absolutely no comparison. Well, as I mentioned, our state legislature, our August legislature here in Iowa, voted on this cannabis legislation. And the same week, the governor signs a bill that allows people to take alcohol out of bars, get a container of hooch, get their favorite old skull popper, and walk out, get in their car, and drive off. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, I'm not making this up. That's what just happened here in Iowa. So, oh my God, we got to get Lucas back on the podcast by George live line, and that's kind of a crazy intro. But with that, Lucas, welcome back to a podcast by George.
Thank you for having me. Good to talk to you again, George.
Yeah, thanks for having us, pal. I can say things that you can't, maybe things that you wouldn't want to say, but that's kind of fun. But that's kind of an opener for us. Now, getting back to how I started, this new law, is this good news for you or bad news, or what is it?
Like too many things in the legislature, it's probably a little bit of both. There's some real positives we can talk about, but there's some real steps backwards too, especially that are going to harm patients. And so, we're kind of threading that line of celebrating the couple of definite good things, but we still got some work left to do if this is going to work long term here.
Well, they ought to talk to people like me, the ding-dongs in the legislature, because like I said, I've got vast hands-on experience with this. I see legislators coming out and pontificating, I call them pontificating pantloads on the news after this is over with, and they're talking about this incremental increase in the level of allowable THC and all. They don't know what they're talking about. They wouldn't recognize a a marijuana plant, if you picked it up and shook it at them, they have no hands-on experience whatsoever. And I look at this and I think, what is their hang-up? Are they concerned that these people that are suffering from these horrible, sometimes life-ending diseases are going to become addicted to marijuana when there's no scientific evidence of that whatsoever? What's the argument on that side of the equation?
That's certainly one of them. I really think a lot of it is just lack of understanding for what this program really is. I mean, very few have set foot in a dispensary and really seen exactly what it is that we're trying to do and the folks we're trying to serve. Which is frustrating because these are exactly like you mentioned. This is not the first line of treatment. These are Iowans who are suffering from really very serious diseases and are looking for any bit of relief. We're not here to cure any of these diseases by any means. That's not what cannabis is going to do, but it can help people just live a little bit better and have a little bit higher quality life as they're dealing with that. And this fear of addiction or this fear of someone may become, quote unquote, too high, where, of course, with some of the other things out there that are totally legal, you could argue that is just as dangerous there, if not more dangerous. It's really, there's just this overwhelming stigma that is started to be broken through a little bit, but we've still got a ways to go here, before we have a program that's sustainable in Iowa.
God, it pisses me off because here's a podcast by George Newsflash, and there are some political people that watch this newscast, but this stuff that's available through the dispensaries, it's science, it's tested, it's expensive. Insurance doesn't cover it. There's very little likelihood, it's infinitesimal likelihood that someone's going to abuse the use of this stuff. And again, I'm a big believer in track records and precedents. I talked a little bit about my own personal track record and experience with these things, but particularly on the legal dispensary side of cannabis, there's no evidence that this stuff is being abused, that it's being, no harm has come to anyone from using this stuff, right?
No, we haven't had one instance of any sort of reported adverse health consequences. We haven't had any reports or issues with patients abusing it or diverting it or using it for any other sort of nefarious means. And I think it's so fundamental to this program. But until you spend the time to really dive into it and understand, people don't understand that. Our average patient is a 56, 57-year-old female, not looking to abuse this. There's other substances available, much simpler, if that's what your goal is. The goal here is for people to have another tool in the toolkit to help them treat some of these really nasty symptoms of these awful, debilitating diseases. And that truly is what people are using it for. We're not a rec state, and we're nowhere close to that. And I think because of the way the state's done a decent job in setting up the program as far as trying to prevent that, it's worked. And yet they don't seem to want to give themselves or anyone else in the program any credit for not actually abusing it.
It's shocking to me. I just can't get over it. And you don't have to dive very deep. Just look at the expense of it. Folks, there isn't anybody that's buying this through a dispensary that's doing it for fun, and there's nobody buying it that's looking to resell it or make money on it. It's too expensive for that. You can buy street grade pot for pennies on the dollar, well, not pennies on the dollar, but maybe dimes on the dollar of what this costs through a dispensary. It's almost laughable. Whatever their concerns are they asking the right kinds of questions? I know you've got the answers, but do our legislators get this, do you think?
Some of them do. It is a tough topic. I'll grant them that. It took us a little while to really get our feet underneath the entire program and understand exactly how it was operating. But the thing that I wish and we encourage and are always open to, but the thing that I wish that happened a little bit more often was just coming and stepping foot inside a dispensary and seeing, the folks that these legislators represent, seeing what their experience is like. Hearing the stories of people who can't get out of bed or can't hold their grandkid anymore. They can't, hold down a job because they're in so much pain. We've got patients who are in their 30s who are undergoing chemotherapy, have had their whole lives upended. Those are, and one of the good things of this new bill is that it allows PTSD to finally become a treatable condition here in Iowa with cannabis. But I mean, until July 1st, till yesterday, we were having all sorts of patients come to us and say, look, I was a law enforcement officer, I was a veteran, and I'm suffering from PTSD. Why can't I get into this program? Why can't I get the same benefit that I could if I lived in Illinois or Minnesota or Missouri, some of these other states? And it's just heartbreaking to look someone in the face and tell them that, no, sorry, we can't. Now, again, we
Yes.
can now, but having that empathy for understanding what these Iowans are dealing with, that's the thing I think we've still got a lot of improvement to do.
Well, and you mentioned PTSD. I encourage folks to check out my podcast on exactly that. I've got a couple of them with Matthew Ho, and he talks about treatment like you're identifying and how it's necessary. And he's one of the world's leading advocates on veteran affairs and PTSD, himself suffering from that. He's 100% disabled from the military. Now, he doesn't live in the state of Iowa, but he can tell you all about the value of it. And I don't know. I get so exasperated when I look at this. I want to tell these folks, I say, okay, I mean, maybe you're concerned about the effects that this has on people. Let's do this. Let's take a pot smoker and let's get a big parking lot and a car and get a pot smoker and put up some barricades and let that guy take a couple of hits of marijuana. Then get a drinker, get a guy that drinks. Let him take a couple of snorts. Put them out there in a barricaded, obstacle course in a parking lot and see how they navigate it. Very simple. I mean, I can guarantee you that the guy under the influence of alcohol is going to have a much tougher time traversing the obstacle course than the guy taking a couple of hits of, street weed even.
Well, so it's funny that we've got so many patients who, up to this point, have been on, different prescription medicines, different opioids, yes, and saying the same thing. It's like, here I am, I'm a vegetable. I can't do anything when I'm under the influence of these, prescribed drugs. And when I'm taking medical cannabis products, it's a whole different story. So again, I mean, having the empathy to understand that each person is going to react a little differently, is going to have a little bit different situation. Again, it won't be right for everyone, but why not make it a tool that's accessible to the most amount of Iowans? If what our goal is, which it should be, is compassionately treating them in any way possible when they're suffering from some of these diseases.
I got just a mile from where I live, a guy under the influence of alcohol and prescription drugs was driving down a highway, crossed across the entire highway, went through a ditch, came up and went through a house. A woman was sitting on her couch watching Wheel of Fortune, hit her and drug her out on the other side of the house and killed her. Jeez. And we just legalized the ability to go into your favorite bar and grab some alcohol and take it out on the road with you. Yeah. And then they continue to jack with folks like you. Now, the one thing I wanted to get to here, on a more serious, well, that's all serious, but on maybe a technical note is the dispensaries. Your organization, how are you guys doing, particularly with this shutdown and the coronavirus and all of this stuff? How's that affected your business?
It's really interesting. You may have seen that in all of the states that have medical programs, they were all deemed essential. And not one state in the country was requiring any of their medical dispensaries to shut down. Some of them did have shutdowns in their rec markets, but no one shut down the medical markets. And same thing happened here in Iowa. We did not have to shut our dispensaries. We moved to curbside delivery to make sure we could protect our patients. We didn't want them, congregating and just increasing any level of risk, because again, they're in some of those most susceptible groups given age and other conditions they're dealing with. But, I think it says something that given the chance to close some of these types of businesses throughout the country, states didn't do so. And I think there's an implicit message there that we understand this can be beneficial and is helping some people. again, using that logic, why are we not trying to make the best program possible in this state and in any state for that matter? But, that being said, it has been a lot tougher for people to get into the program. They've had difficulty getting to their doctor, getting the certification they need. A lot of doctors' offices were closed for a long period of time there in March and April and even into May. So that's been frustrating. The bill does remove the Department of Transportation from the process, which is nice, but that had been another stumbling block during the coronavirus outbreak. So certainly had some effect, and I think some patients were probably went underserved, but hopefully we're able to reach them a little bit easier here in the coming months.
Well, you touched on a couple of them there, but before we go out, just give me a quick little checklist. Give me the positives of this most recent legislation, kind of tick off a few of those, and then tick off a few of the negatives.
Yeah, the biggest positives are certainly in regards to access. So PTSD becoming a condition. They've simplified and really streamlined the definition of pain. Chronic pain is now the condition that can get you access into the program, which is a much easier condition for doctors and patients to navigate. We don't have the DOT. You don't have to go to the DOT anymore to get your card. There's new providers. There's physician's assistants and ARNPs can now certify. So those are all big steps in the right direction. As far as products are concerned, the 3% THC cap that really hampered the types of forms we're able to offer is finally gone. And so that means new vape forms and other new forms that'll really expand the access for patients are now going to be able to be formulated. Of course, that leads right into the biggest drawback of this bill is that instead of that 3% cap, they've replaced it with a 4.5 gram purchase limit. So over the course of 90 days, patients can only purchase 4.5 grams of THC in total. We know from our experience operating in Iowa every single day since 2018 that some patients, no big deal, that's going to be fine because they're at lower doses. Other patients have established doses that are much higher than that. And again, we don't limit the types of doses that may be necessary for patients in really any other forms. What we do is make sure that within the doctor-patient relationship, they can get treated as effectively as they need to be. And instead here, we're saying, well, if you need more than that 4.5 grams, sorry. And if you've been taking doses that are more than 4.5 grams up to this point, sorry. So that's really frustrating. There's a waiver process. We'll see how easy that becomes to navigate for some patients. But that 4.5 gram limit is about 5 times lower than the next state's lowest limit. So we've got work to do there. There's a lot of scientific evidence to show that limit is just not going to work for all patients, and hopefully we can continue to get that worked on.
Wow. Yeah, see, that's how I got confused. I looked just at a glance. I looked at the headline. I thought, well, they went from 3% to 4.5%. That's got to be good. No, they went 3% to 4.5 grams, which is 5 times less than what you can get from a dispensary in a neighboring state. So, okay. Immediate objectives then is getting that gram that level raised. Is that going to be priority number one for you? I mean, this is all an evolving process. Yeah. We've talked about that before.
It sure is. That's going to be probably our biggest priority. Again, we've treated people. We know where patients are being dosed at right now. And now our conversation is going to shift from, hey, you can't get into the program, to patients who are already in saying, well, hey, remember how your dose was 65 milligrams a day, you've got to back that down. Sorry. Unless you can get one of these waivers signed. Hopefully, maybe those waivers will be relatively simple and there'll be a lot of doctors signing them. I hope that's the case. We're certainly going to provide all the evidence to our patients that they'll need to maybe make that case with their doctor. But short of that, and again, it takes an extra step. It's an extra step going to your doctor again and having that conversation, getting into the doctor alone. Again, our patients are suffering. They're dealing with really pretty awful conditions. Why we're making it so hard on them, beyond me. But here we are, and so again, something that we'll have to keep working on.
Well, yeah, I could title this podcast "House of Mirrors" because it seems like that's where we're living, and I saw it just in the news this week. To go back to where we're at, we just made it easier for people to get their favorite bottle of hooch, to get some old skull popper, and jump behind the wheel and head off down the road, and we made it more difficult for people to get a level of this legal cannabis for a life-ending disease or something like ALS, for God's sake. I mean, it's beyond belief. It really is. Well, that's going to wrap it up. Lucas, thanks for coming back on a podcast by George.
You bet. Always happy to join you, George.
And we'll come back to this. It's an evolving story. It'll change. Hopefully those folks will keep doing the good work that they're doing, and they'll get some new legislation. And when they do, you'll find out about it here. And if you want to follow Podcast by George, please do that. On YouTube is a great place. Of course, we're all over Facebook, probably our most popular medium. That and iTunes, and where the audio versions can be seen and heard. You can get those just about any place podcasts are found. But for right now, that's going to wrap it up. That's going to do it, folks. That's another podcast by George.